check, good. So I'm Max Ceron, Max Ceron, CWB Association Welding Podcast. Today we have a really cool guest, Welding Podcast.
The show is about to begin.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the CWB Association podcast. My name is Max Ceron and I am here with another guest. Lately, we've been doing lots of different guests from all over the place, so it's nice for me to bring in a guest from my province here, beautiful Saskatchewan, the land of the living skies. Today, I have Shayne Sutcliffe coming to us from JNE. Shayne, how's it going?
Oh, I'm doing great. Like we were just talking about a few minutes ago, I'm basically melting in this gorgeous Saskatchewan weather today.
People outside of Saskatchewan do not know what Saskatchewan summers are like. Like, yes, we have 9 months of winter, true. And then 2 months around that are iffy at best, but July and August are hot. And like, we're the hottest place in Canada.
Oh, it's absolutely ridiculous, you know. And then what I don't get lately is this back and forth thing. So we're 34 today and they're calling for 18 tomorrow. Like, how do you deal with that? You know, how do you go from sweating like crazy to basically feeling like winter or fall is around the corner, right?
Sweater weather.
Yeah, no kidding.
Awesome, Shayne. So you work for JNE and you are the project manager for the quick fab department at JNE.
That's correct. Yeah.
So for the people outside of Saskatchewan who don't know what JNE is, give us the rundown of what JNE is as a company and what do they do?
Absolutely. So the company was founded in the 1980s by the original owner, Jim Nowakowski. That's where the name comes from. And it literally started out as Jim with a truck driving around doing mobile work. Before too long, his name got out there and the quality of his work spoke for itself. And he started getting more projects, having more requests come in, and he had to move into a shop. I can't remember the exact address. I know Shallon would kill me for this, but I know it was somewhere around the Spadina Crescent area, I believe, was where the first shop was. And it was just a little single bay garage, more or less, right? And quickly outgrew that. We have two facilities today. We have one on 56th Street here in Saskatoon, as well as one on our Thatcher Avenue in the north end of Saskatoon. And the 56th Street location was the sort of the original JNE building. That was where kind of things really kicked off. And yeah, so it started out with one little bay at the 56th facility, which was basically a trucking depot at the time. So it had a whole bunch of bays. Jim got busier, bought the next bay, got busier yet again, bought the next bay, and it just kind of kept going and going. And essentially what we've turned into is we are now one of the largest engineer-to-order fabricators in the entire province. And we've serviced pretty much every industry that there is out here: potash, oil and gas in Alberta, power generation here in Saskatchewan and across Canada. We do a lot of big partnerships with Sask Power. A lot of the power poles that you'll see driving down the highways, we've been involved in fabricating those for years now. K+S, the potash facility down in southern Saskatchewan, we had a huge hand in helping to get that facility made and build quite a few of the large pressure vessels large vessels, I should say, that went into that facility. And yeah, so that's kind of the history in a nutshell, so to speak. There's much more to it that I'm not even aware of, I'm sure. But yeah, so currently we're two facilities, about 150 standing men and women in the shop, and full supporting staff of administrative and management.
You know, that's crazy. In my career in Saskatchewan, I'm in Regina here in Saskatoon. JNE's always been on the radar because I've worked for many companies that compete with JNE. So the Sask Power pole contract used to be ran by Engineered Products at Brant for over 30 years. And I was a part of helping get some of the jig setups going and stuff like that at Brant when I was there. And then also I worked at Dyna Industrial for 10 years. Right. And Dyna Industrial competes with JNE for lots of the potash mining work. Right. Absolutely. So, and I think these competitions are healthy in the industry myself. I think good companies push other good companies.
100%. Yeah. And I mean, that helps make the entire province stronger, right? I mean, one company kind of becoming a monopoly or the only player in the game, so to speak, doesn't help the province as a whole when that capacity is already assigned and can't be, used to help other companies. With having a wealth of companies that have grown up around each other, like you mentioned, the Dyna Industrials, there's a IMM Industrial Manufacturing and Machine Shop here in Saskatoon as well. There's lots of other companies in Regina. Yeah. They all kind of grew up together, and that's a really neat kind of history, I guess, is one way to look at it here in Saskatchewan. I'm from BC originally, and I didn't have a whole lot of time in the manufacturing industry there to see how the communities and the companies kind of worked together and integrated. But I personally in my career have never seen the level of integration that I have out here in Saskatchewan in terms of how well all the businesses tend to integrate. I mean, we all compete against each other. At the end of the day, we're all trying to make money. That there's no two ways about that. But at the same time, too, having the ability to bounce something off somebody else and say, hey, our shop's full. Is this possibly an opportunity you guys are interested in taking a look at? And vice versa, kind of a scratch your back, we'll scratch our back and we'll scratch yours type scenario, right? So it's been amazing to see that out here, to be honest.
Well, and it's, you bring up a really awesome point that I speak about this all the time. I work for a national agency. I'm all over Canada all the time. And I've seen a lot in terms of companies and layouts and structures and blah, blah, blah. And I've worked in a lot of different places. And I always say that Saskatchewan has manufacturing at another level. And I think one of them is obviously our space. We have basically unlimited power. We don't have power grid failures in Saskatchewan. This isn't a thing that happens. It happens in lots of other provinces. Ontario, it's brutal. Saskatchewan, it's not a thing. So number one, we don't have power issues. Number two, we don't have water issues. We have as much water as we can handle anywhere. And number three, we have square footage. We have all the square footage we need, all on main rail, all on main highway. Nothing here is out of the way. So the manufacturing processes and companies that, like you say, have grown up in Saskatchewan are huge. And we're talking about some of the largest boring mills in North America, some of the largest lathes in North America, some of the largest sub-arcs in North America. We're doing equipment, crystallizers, the crystallizers you guys pushed through a few years back. These physically can't be made anywhere else in Canada because JNE, and that's one thing that you're talking about bouncing things back and forth. When I was at Dyna, we had the largest boring mill in North America at the time. I think there's one company that has a bigger one now, but we're talking 60-foot bed, 200-foot spread. This is a huge boring mill. So very specific jobs come to that size of boring mill. But the only other company that we could work with at that time that had a shop big enough to do the stuff we were doing was JNE in Saskatoon. Because you guys have a massive shop. Like I've done the tour there. It's huge.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, our beef facility is something else. I still remember the first day I started there. I started there in 2011, and I came here from BC as a welder. Got a job with Genie as a welder to start with, and my first day was in Shop E. That was where they assigned me for my first day. And I remember walking through those doors, as I think at that point I had 5 or 6 years under my belt in my career in terms of being in the welding force, and just basically my jaw hit the floor. Just to see a building of that size and what was going on in there at the time. And, I think I should know this off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure we've got 120 tons of crane capacity across the 6 hooks and the 3 bridges. To see, I'm pretty sure the day I walked in, there was a massive tank being flipped or something. And it's just something you're like, coming from a small town in BC, working in a coal mine in the northern part of the country, you didn't see stuff like that. Right. And then you walk in and there's this huge pressure vessel being slung up by cranes and moved through the air. And it's a real, wow, look at where I am moment. Right. Yeah. And, and it's only gotten bigger since then. That was, like I said, almost 10 years ago at this point. Right. So, you're absolutely right. Having a facility of that size really puts some, landmark projects into this province. And it gives a lot of comfort and reassurance to the companies we work with when we tell them, this is the capacity that we have available. And that's not even our full capacity either, right? That's one shop of 3 or 4 buildings that we've got, right? So yeah, it's a pretty cool place to work. If I'm just gonna keep patting myself on the back here and just keep, banging the company drum, so to speak. But I really do love working there. It's a really cool place.
And that's the way you gotta be. That's the way you gotta be, man. Like, I mean, this is a small industry and everyone remembers who everybody is. I haven't left a company. Well, I shouldn't say there's one, and I'm not going to name them, but I haven't really ever left a company on bad terms because you don't want to. Like, I mean, be proud of the work you do with the company and work off. And if you feel like it's time to move on, then you move on. But that's your own prerogative. Don't slam the company, right?
Yeah, absolutely. They put food on your table for however long you're there, right? That's the least you can do is leave a good review, I guess, is one way to look at it.
Yeah, on Yelp, JNE on Yelp.
Yeah. Speaking of which, Google reviews.
Yeah. So you said you came as a welder from BC. So let's start. Where were you born?
So I was born in Surrey, actually, on the mainland, and lived there till I was about 10 years old. And then my family decided to move to Vancouver Island. And that was where I spent my formative years and grew up in a place called the Comox Valley there. And beautiful place to grow up as a kid. I mean, nothing against Saskatchewan, I love the province. I've been out here for 10 years, but, there's not many places I've ever been in the world that are like BC, let alone Vancouver Island. It's an absolutely amazing place to grow up as a child.
It's unique. Yeah. Unique.
Yeah. You've got mountains 10 minutes away. You've got the ocean 10 minutes away. You've got forests and lakes and rivers and the whole 9 yards. It's a pretty unique experience growing up in an environment like that. So I feel very fortunate that was my background and where I was able to grow up. But yeah, I got out of high school. I did what a lot of kids do, kind of got out, found a job for a bit, realized I did not like working in, retail and those fields,
what were you selling? What was your retail job?
I think I spent a couple of years in a lumber yard. I was a dishwasher at a grocery store / kitchen for a bit, and those kind of jobs where you realize like, man, I really want to do something else. So then there's a company or an institution called North Island College in Campbell River. And that was where I went and took my welding level C. Then for people that are listening in, I guess, I don't know, not everyone's aware of it, but the apprenticeship programs are a little bit different in each province. So out here in Alberta, you call it, apprenticeship year 1, year 2, year 3. BC's got a letter grading system. So it's level C, level B, level A for that part. So I took my welding level C, which was about 8 to 10 months in class, or 8 to 9 months in class. And then you got to make up the remainder of a year to get your ticket. Worked for a small company in Comox called Grey Rock Welding, which was just a 5 or 6 man operation in their town. But then they actually had a satellite facility, and I use that term loosely. It was basically a shed in the back of the owner's property out in the middle of nowhere in Black Creek, where we manufactured oil tanks. So just, you can picture those, like those oval shaped things that sit next to trailers that use for heating oil. Yeah, that was my job day in and day out. So for the better part of a 6-month period there, I was back to questioning if I wouldn't have been better off in a lumberyard or washing dishes. But
at least was it Meg or doing them all in stick in the backyard outside? Or
you want to know what the crazy thing? So they were like 14 gauge, you know how thin that is, but we were welding them with like 3.5 hardwire, like 36 volts downhand. So
that is everything wrong.
Yeah, I know.
Everything wrong you just said there.
And the craziest part, they're ULC listed, so it was all proved. It was all vetted. It was all engineered and the whole 9 yards. But I can remember.
I'm sure the engineer had no idea that the machine was 36 volts. I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah, I'm willing to bet the actual weld procedure didn't list that. But yeah, you talk about like. It was a repetitive process. You're doing the same thing day in and day out, but you get pretty good at it after a while. And, you're doing a 4-foot weld seam down in like 30 seconds. So, you learn to watch your puddle and you learn what to look for pretty quick. Yeah, absolutely. I can still remember I was trading with the guy that was the supervisor / lead out there. And after we welded them up, they came off a hydraulic table that would wrap the shells and everything. You'd weld them all up in there, various positions, whatever. And then when you're done, you got to go and do an air test to check for leaks. Well, he dips his side of the tank that we welded. He's got 1 or 2 little spots. He dips mine and it looked like a sprinkler. There's just bubbles coming out of everywhere. So he looks at me and he says, we've got some work to do.
We'll have to run another one on top.
Yeah, pretty much. So, as far as what the work was, it wasn't the most glamorous by any means, but it was definitely a fast way to learn, how to get good, I guess, on that one specific process. But fast forward a couple of years, spent about, like I said, 6 to 12 months doing that, got a little bit of time in the main shop, and then things started to slow down. I guess to back up even further, when I got my C-level, when I got out of school, it was right at the start of the global recession. So this was like 2008. I can't remember exactly when that kicked off. Yeah. So I was in a group of 37 people that took this C-level welding program. And I communicated with quite a few of them a few years later. I could only find 3 out of that entire group that stuck with the trade just because of how hard it was to try to find something. And in BC, especially at that time, the fishing industry had been effectively destroyed, more or less. Logging was kind of basically done at that point. So a lot of the industries that supported the welding shops, the welding jobs, all the associated like supporting manufacturing roles and stuff, unless you were building something for out of province, there was not much happening. I think between in person and digitally, I think I sent out over 150 resumes in the period of about 2 to 3 months. And the only callback I got was from Grey Rock for that tank farm job. And I actually spent, I think, 2 to 3 weeks living off Itchy Ban and like putting as little gas in my car as I could while I was down in Victoria with some friends, going to all the major fab shops. There was a whole bunch on the southern part of the island and an area called Sydney that I thought I would have a good chance with. But the same story was, sorry, I don't even have money to look at hiring like somebody with a skill set already in place, let alone an apprentice right out of school. So it was not that, I'm not going to lie. It was frustrating and it was disheartening. It was one of those moments where you kind of look back at your life way down the road and you know what made you stronger. But at the time it was like, man, did I make a massive mistake? Like, should I have done something else? Should I have looked at doing another trade or some other job? And it was a tough time, I think, for everybody. But, like I said, there was a lot of people that were fresh out of high school, fresh out of trade school. They were all in the same position as I was. So competition was extremely high. Job market was low, kind of the exact opposite of where we find ourselves these days, right? So anyways, past all that, got through the tank farm, got some hours in. Another slowdown came, and I think this was probably near the tail end of 2000 or the middle of 2009, somewhere in that range. And instead of just taking a layoff and sitting on my butt, I said, you know what, fine, you guys, Grey Rock, lay me off. I'll go back to school. I'll go get my B level and take the fabrication foundation program while I'm there. So I went there, took that program, absolutely loved the B-level welding, getting to do TIG and that kind of stuff. That was where that all starts off. That's where you do your pressure ticket when it comes to BC setups. You do your stick welding on pressure piping and stuff like that. Yeah. And then once I got through that, I just segued straight into what they called it fabrication foundation. So it wasn't the official start of a fab apprenticeship. You would have to go through a different process to do that, but it was basically a 6 or 8 month course.
Learn all the machinery, rolling, bending, forming, everything.
Yeah, all the math and all the layout work and stuff like that went with it. And it basically got you would have been somewhere around the start of a 3rd year apprenticeship with all the information that they gave you, kind of. And I love that. I really found a passion for that. Press brake, I loved working on that. I loved developing all the drawings, and we did a whole lot of manual layout. All the stuff that's done by computer, like CAD programs today, they taught us how to do manually. So, we were doing parallel line development, like doing pipe layouts and coping and stuff like that, all on paper. Yeah, absolutely. It was really cool. I actually ended up using that later in my life when I worked at a company that didn't have any kind of a CAD support system. So it was great. And then once that finished up, got my B level, finished the fab program. It still was a pretty similar situation, not as bad as during the main part of the recession, but it was still a pretty tough job market. I bounced around to a couple of jobs. I actually found work with one of the instructors at North Island College, had a small fab shop in Campbell River, worked there for 3 or 4 months until, again, the work dried up. And at that point too, kind of the same story. I was questioning my choices. Here I am again, jobless, sitting around trying to find something. And one of the guys that I had done my B-level welding with and had been in my fabrication program, he was a fellow by the name of Brian. His family was actually from a small town called Chetwynd in northern BC. And he'd headed back there after finishing the fabrication program and had found a job like that with a company up there that worked in the coal mines. So basically, out of a sheer act of desperation, I texted him one night. I said, "Hey man, it sucks down here. There's nothing going on. Like, are you having any luck with the job market up there?" About an hour later, he texts back. He's like, "Oh yeah, no, it's busy as all hell up here." He said, "You come up, you can find something for sure." And I said, I just sent back to him. I said, "I don't really know anybody up there. Is there any, anything you could recommend that I should apply for or whatever?" And I didn't get a response for, a couple of hours. So I was kind of like, oh, maybe he's off doing something or whatever. And then I get a message at about, I think it was like 9:30 at night or whatever. He was like, "If you can be here inside of 48 hours, I have a job for you." And this is like from where I was on Vancouver Island to where this town is. It's like an 1,800 kilometer trip north. And I didn't have a car. So taking what's left of the money I had in my bank account and a generous loan from my parents that I paid back eventually, I got a bus ticket. So this is back in the day when Greyhound was still a thing. Yeah. I took a 28-hour bus trip that had 3 connections between Comox, BC and Chetwynd, BC, and ended up there at like 5 a.m. the next day to walk into a shop, go meet the owner of the company, a guy named Scott, and this was a company called Peace Valley Industries. And basically my job test was, here's a track pad off a dozer and here's an ice lug. Weld this on and I'll hit it with a hammer. And if it breaks off, you got to go back home. So
that should be easy. That should be easy.
Yeah. So throw the weld down. He hits it with a hammer. It stays on. He's like, okay, perfect. 4 a.m. tomorrow, you're going out in the bush to go put about 200 of these things on a couple of dozers. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was a real like baptism by fire, whatever you want to call it. Here you are in the Great Wide North, right? And yeah, bounced around out there, did the coal mining thing for a year, went back home, got married the summer after I went up there, brought my new wife up to the northern part of Canada with me. We spent another year there bouncing around. And then she actually got accepted into the pharmacy program here in Saskatchewan. And that was what made us come out here. So
at the U of S.
Yeah, the U of S. Yeah, that's right. And so that was 2012 when we moved. Or no, sorry, 2011. Yeah, I always get my dates mixed up with that one. Came out here. I basically had the exact opposite experience of everything I'd experienced in my life to that point with the job market. I fired out about half a dozen resumes here in Saskatoon, and I got like 4 callbacks requesting me to come in for an interview. I interviewed twice with JNE, and I also had a job offer actually at Hitachi here in town, which is now branched after Hitachi moved out. And Hitachi basically offered me the same kind of package that JNE was looking at. It was about the same wage. It was about the same job profile, if we want to call it that. Big difference was the way Hitachi ran their program. It was you worked a week of days, a week of nights, and you kept cycling back and forth. And
yeah, I did that for years. It's tough.
Oh man. I would rather be, I mean, I hate night shift, to be just, call a spade a spade, but if it's got to be one, I would rather it be one or the other, not back and forth. You just never get into a rhythm that way.
Yeah, I was a night shift guy. I loved the night shift, but I also had the life hack from an old guy when I was young. He's like, you want to climb the ladder fast, you take nights. Because they're always looking for supervisors, they're always looking for lead hands, they're always looking for the person to do CPR and all the training. So that was my train. I'm like, I want to move into management ASAP. So I took nights. I did nights for like 8 years.
Oh yeah, no, it's definitely a good way to fast track your career. It's like you said, it's hard to keep people in roles like that, right? Because of the night shift thing, right? So it definitely has higher turnover for supervisors, leads, whatever, right? I just didn't want that.
I was kind of sucks.
Yeah, I was like, no, I've done the night shift thing in the mines. I did the 26-hour shifts. I said, I'm kind of looking to scale things back a bit in a shop here. So I went with JNE. Ultimately, obviously, how things worked out with Hitachi, nothing against the company, but it obviously worked out for the best that way for me in terms of being with a company that's still here and has been a great company to work for. So yeah, I started with them in September 2011.
At this point, had you finished off your red seal? Had you gotten back to your level to get your level A and finish off your red seal, or were you still at a B level?
No, I actually never did complete my red seal in either welding or fabricating. So as it sits right now, I still am just a journeyman, I guess. I've got my journeyman status from BC, but never really transferred that over here to Saskatchewan. But basically with JNE, I moved in there, and within 6 months working in the B shop that I'd mentioned earlier, I was approached and asked if I was interested in moving into a lead hand role. So that took me over to our 56th Street facility, where they were looking at having me put some additional leadership in for a very large project we were doing. So I, kind of took a chance. I was a little unsure of myself and a little unconfident at the start of that. I was like, man, I've only got 5 or 6 years total. Like, I really don't feel like I'm necessarily ready to be a supervisor. But I had a great support network. Our shop superintendent, Brad Zur, him personally. He's a great guy. He was the one that put me in that position and offered me that opportunity. And, forever grateful for that, because it's changed the way my entire career unfolded to this point. And then I worked under an excellent supervisor, a fellow by the name of Jim Hand. He's been with JNE for the better part of 20 years now. And really, it was a situation where even though I felt that I wasn't necessarily completely qualified to do the role, I had enough support from everybody that was there with me to feel like I could become competent in that role in the time that was needed. So it really was a kind of a blitz almost. Like, I went from here you are running beads on a piece of plate to, okay, here's 15 guys. You got to organize what they're doing and make sure everyone stays on task and sticking the deadlines to the
doing your
projects.
planning and your
Exactly.
your streaming of the shop, and do you need to move equipment, and how you're going to build the cells, and
absolutely.
Which to me, as a manager of shops for so many years, was like my favorite thing to do. Be like,
yeah.
ooh, a big project is coming.
Yeah.
You know, you got the blueprint of the shop, and you're like, okay, well, this machine isn't going to be here. This is going to have to move here, and this is going to have to move here, and then we have to set up tables here. And oh, that's like the funnest part.
Likewise, that was probably one of my favorite things to do, was just like to figure out the best way to optimize workflow. Because, you know, JNE being what we are, we're a custom steel fabricator. We don't do a lot of repetitive builds, right? We don't
Things
do
move,
like like the power poles are probably one of the projects we've done that's the most repetitive. Generally speaking, it's one-offs. You know, it's pump boxes, it's pressure vessels, it's pipe skids. So it's not a lot of opportunities to build a workflow that stays consistent, right? So you're always having to rearrange the shop, and you're always having to come up with new ideas in terms of how you're going to move the material from raw product into processed parts, into
and under the right crane that can do the right thing.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's like a, you know, just a giant puzzle every time you come to work, and that really kept me coming back. You know, some people, that's not their ideal world. You know, they just want to come to work and, you know, do the same thing day in and day out. That's for the most part, those are not the kind of people that work at JNE. We've got an extremely strong depth of individuals and skilled tradesmen, and they really, you know, I do feel that they like coming to work every day because of the variety of work that we deal with. You know, it's very, every day is going to be a different day. You know, you can almost say without doubt that you're not going to be doing the same thing tomorrow that you were doing today. Maybe some of the large projects that go through Shop B that, you know, have long development life cycles and that stay in somewhat of a similar state for a while, you could say, yeah, okay, I got about a month on this thing. But you know, you're not coming to work and saying, like, a year from now, I'm going to be doing the exact same thing I was doing today. It's going to be something different for sure. So,
and even the products in a custom fab shop that hit their mark. So every now and then you get the custom thing in, but then all of a sudden that custom thing in becomes like, hey, everyone loved this. Let's do 10 of them. And then you build the temporary jigs, and you set up the small production run to do that. It still has a feeling of finiteness. Like, this isn't forever.
Exactly.
This is 3 of 10. Even if it's a 2 or 3 year project, you still know that there's an end in sight.
Exactly.
And generally you can even say to your boss, like, I'm kind of bored of this. Can you move me into another area? And if you got a good boss, they'll be like, yeah, sure, let's switch things around, right?
Yeah, that's one thing that we actually do a fair bit at JNE is reassigning workers based on skill sets needed for different areas. So, you know, even if you were working on one project that had like a 1 year life cycle or whatever, it's almost guaranteed you're not staying on that the whole time, because we're very dynamic. We got a lot of work that comes in and out of the shops, and a lot, like we said before, you know, the layout of the shops changes almost weekly in some cases, right? Especially at 56. Like, I've shared lots of content on LinkedIn where you see a photo on a Monday of a shop full of structural steel, you know, with some large beam sections. There's a couple of ducts in the back or whatever. And then I'll share a photo from Friday, and it's like, well, here's some stainless pipe that's in the same place where all this structural was a week ago, right? So yeah, it's insane the amount of stuff that moves through some of those buildings in the timeline it does. And yeah, it's like I said, you know, it's not necessarily a guarantee that you're going to work on one project from start to finish. You'll definitely be moved around and, you know, kind of plunked in as your skill set fits. And it's like I said, the people that stay there generally tend to really like that.
So in your experience coming over from BC as a welder to Saskatchewan, you know, how would you look at our state of industry in the welding industry here in Saskatchewan? Like, how do you feel about, you know, the young welders coming up? How do you feel about the climate of the industry? How do you look at it?
I think one thing I can definitely say about Saskatchewan is that I think there's a lot more consistency in the industry in terms of the opportunities you're going to see. Like, you're not, I mean, you know, you can say with some level of certainty that there are different things going on in different parts of the province, but I don't know that it's as broken up as BC is, because like I was saying before, you got Vancouver Island, like, since fishing and logging died, like I said, basically all you really have there is the marine industry. So you got shops that make boats. That's kind of the majority. They got the shipyards in Victoria. There's some pretty decent work there. I've actually got my brother-in-law that works in that area, and there's a good bit of work for pipe fitters.
Well,
and the
it's busy now, but it was real dry for a few years.
Oh yeah, it was dead. That, like I said before, that was one of the places I applied, and they just said, good luck. But then even then, you move from the island to the mainland even, and that's only, you know, 300-400 kilometers away. And there, then you got a fair bit more work going into the States. You got more stuff that's kind of based around the geography of the interior of the province. So there's a little bit of farming stuff. but more kind of, like obviously downtown Vancouver and all that stuff. There's not a huge amount of manufacturing there anymore because it's kind of transitioned to more like a tech
and
hub.
it's too expensive to manufacture.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the ports definitely helped back in the day in order, in terms of making it kind of like accessible to the global markets. But yeah, you're right. It's, real estate in Vancouver, like, oh God, I can't even imagine what a building like our B shop, the footprint of that would cost in Vancouver to rent or whatever. It'd just be insane. And then, like you mentioned too, the power constraints, BC's, they've got an abundance of hydro energy, but they've also got in the Vancouver core, they got 3-4 million people using that power grid, right? So it's
And I have a friend who was just out right on the coast, and a giant company. I won't name them. They're a little bit controversial, but they bought hundreds of acres of land to build these giant shops, and the power grid basically failed. And the BC government basically told them, like, that's it. That's all we got. You can't get more. So they had to build skids, and they're running off diesel. Like, they're doing diesel power to power their building, and they're having to ship in. Like, could you imagine trying to run a manufacturing plant off diesel power, especially now at $2 a liter?
Yeah. No kidding. Yeah, I wouldn't want to see that, Bill. I'd probably just maybe I want to run the other direction.
Yeah.
But yeah, so when you look at that, and like I said, the northern part of the province, you got a lot of resource-based stuff. So you got coal mines, there's diamond mining, and we go farther north.
You got pulp facilities, paper.
Yeah, pulp and paper. It's coming back. It was it followed the logging industry. Like, it died off pretty hard in the early 2000s, late 2000s, but it's seeing a resurgence now alongside with the logging industry. But like I was saying though, like, you've got almost like 4 or 5 distinct areas that service entirely different sectors. Whereas in Saskatchewan, working in Regina and being
ag and mining
shops, ag and mining, yeah, and then also oil and gas. Being our proximity to the Williston Basin, southern Saskatchewan, Estevan, that area, and then obviously we're also not all that far removed from Alberta, and the guys are out in Fort Mac there. So to say that you could go if you've got a skill set that's complementary to those sectors, if you've got experience pipe welding, working with pressure vessels, whatever else, farm equipment, you can pretty reliably say, like, somewhere in Saskatchewan, there's going to be work for you. And I know it wasn't that case. I'm trying to run my Saskatchewan history. I'm going to say 20 plus years ago. From what I can recall of the stories that have been told, it was basically a point there where the welding institutions were training guys up and saying, okay, here's your ticket. Go find a different province to live in because you're not going to find work out here. So
it's a tricky thing. I've been in Saskatchewan welding for 27 years. Well, almost, let's see, how old am I? Almost 30 years, dude. Wow, that's freaky. Wow. So almost 30 years I've been welding, and I've never not been able to find a job in Saskatchewan. Yeah. Like, I've always been, like, literally the next day been able to find a job. Granted, I took it on myself to make myself more valuable. Early on in my career, I realized that stainless steel was, the hidden gem of the prairies. Yeah. Because potash, mining, uranium, all that stuff is stainless. You get into some of the oil gas tanks, API, all stainless. You get up north into the cold weather stuff, stainless. Absolutely. So I was like, I gotta get my stainless tickets, and that always kept me hired. So even during like the 2008, 2012, all these downturns, I was okay, but I did see some ebb and flow. But I don't feel like we got hit as hard as other provinces. Oh no! Like, I feel like other provinces really suffered, because there was times when I'd be at a company and we'd get like hundreds of applications from Alberta. And it's like, why are they applying here? They make more money there. Why are they coming here for $10 less an hour? But it's like, oh, they have no work. Like, that's crazy.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no. So that would be what I would say is probably the biggest difference coming from BC to Saskatchewan. And again, I've been out here for 10 years now, so I can't really say with a lot of certainty what the situation's like out there right now. But, like we've been talking about, everything considered, I don't imagine it's gotten much better for trades. Not to say that there's not probably a corresponding demand just based on this labor shortage that we're facing across the country. I'm willing to bet that the skilled trades are definitely in demand out there, but I don't imagine it's quite to the extent that it is out here, like you were talking about. Saskatchewan's positioned right now. We've got Eric Anderson, the executive director of SIMSA, the Saskatchewan Industrial Mining Supply Organization. I can't remember the last part of the name. He's based out of our 56th Street location. Like, their offices are upstairs. And I was talking with him the other day. We were just kind of chatting about world events and, the impending recession that everyone's talking about. And he was like, I can't pretend to have a crystal ball, but he said, Saskatchewan's probably not going to really be affected that hard by this. He said, we have everything the world wants. Uranium has skyrocketed in value since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, rather. Potash, the entire world needs fertilizer. Well, a decent chunk of that came from Belarus and Russia. Those are all off the table now. It's. I don't
We've
think
always
there's many
been
other,
the ag leader, like period.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there's no bigger ag source than us. So
yeah, I don't think there's many provinces that could say they're as well positioned as we are to kind of weather this storm, so to speak. Right? It's going to be an interesting few years, I think, but at the same time too, I think it's breaks off full steam ahead out here, to be honest.
I keep trying to convince all my Ontario counterparts. I'm like, you guys need to be. They keep being like, when are you moving to Ontario? Never. When are you moving to Saskatchewan? Like, are you kidding me? We just the helium mines going up in Cornac.
Oh yeah.
And they just shut down 3 other helium mines around the world because they're empty. So we're one of, I think, 3 helium mines in the entire planet. Yeah. Like, I mean, we're good. We're golden.
Oh yeah.
There's like 2 or 3 more potash mines supposed to be going up right away here soon. Jansen just had its huge expansion at BHP. It's like everywhere I look, everyone's like, okay, we need welders. Okay. And at the CWB, we don't promote individual welders. That's not our stick. We want to just support the framework, right?
Exactly.
So we just message up being like, hey, okay, this company needs welders. How many welders do you need? Oh, 400. It's like, like, I mean,
kidding.
Yeah. Like, what are you talking about? And that's just one company. And then you talk to, Brandt, well, we need to hire 150 and, these guys need to hire 200 and Sweepright needs 50 and Rightway needs 10 and Dagelman's needs 40. So you're looking at a shortage of a few thousand tradespersons in one trade in one province.
Yeah.
I mean, all 4 campuses of Sask Poly, and then we got SIIT, we got Gabriel Dumont, we got a few extension programs. If you put every college together in Saskatchewan, you're probably pumping out maybe 200 to 300 students a year, tops, level 1s.
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, you got a 3 to 4 year turnaround on level 1s before they get skilled. So, I mean, we're already 800 employees short, and the ones we get are just fresh. And so, then no knock on them. We all start somewhere. Like, I was an idiot when I started too. Like, I mean, I still remember the first thing I ever welded, and it was terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's definitely a situation where, like you said, whether it's lack of options or, just the sheer need for people, like, it's never been a better time to be a first year apprentice, to be honest, because you're not fighting all that hard to find a job right now.
And you're going to find yourself in a leadership position in 5-6 years, guaranteed.
Yeah, no, it's a great time to be getting into the trades. And I think, honestly, I think you mentioned this a couple of times in the past here, the governments of Canada, historically, there's not been a great job done, I would say, around supporting the trades. I think there needs to be a lot more push out there showing the youth, especially, that you don't have to go to university and get a 4-year degree to make something of yourself. If that's what you want, great. Props to you. That's fine. It's the welding trades. They're not for everybody. But to say that going to a college or a vocational school or a trade school or whatever makes you less than somebody that's got a 4-year degree, that's a completely wrong statement. That's so backwards and so 1940s, 1950s style thinking, archaic, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. So I guess just as a shout out there to all the young kids that might be tuning in or see this in some format, give trades a chance, have a look. And JNE, we've got a policy. Anybody that wants to come tour our shops, you can. All you got to do, just reach out to our email address on the website, contact one of our main people. You can call me directly. You can contact Shalon at our other facility, or any one of the people that's listed on our website as far as contact goes. We love giving tours. We love taking people through the facility. Like you said, you've been in there and seen our facilities. It's a pretty cool show. It's you come in, you see what we're working on, you meet some of our people, you see what a day in the life, so to speak, of a welder can be. And like you said, it's not all dingy shops and dark corners of some dirty.
It was a really cool. When I had my tour there, I walked in completely unexpected at the time. I was teaching at Sask Poly, and I had met Brad a few times through college stuff. He's on the trade board for Saskatchewan. So, I'd met him a few times on and off, and he's a super nice guy, easy to get along with. And I was in Saskatoon for something else, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to rip by JNE and see if Brad's there. Hey, is Brad here? Yeah, he's here. And tell him Max is here. And he's like, Max who? It's like, oh, I've met you a couple times. Oh, hey, do you want the tour? Sure. So he gives me a tour, and you know what? The employees on the floor, and I'm not just like pump JNE's tires, but the engineers on the floor, there was this big whiteboard on the side, or one of the welders on the floor, there was a big whiteboard on the side of the wall. And I was like, oh, you guys are lean. Right away, this guy's like, yeah, JNE sent me for my lean training. And so now we have this like lean board, and you can see where I have these jobs lined up, and this is where it goes next, and this is who's working.
Absolutely.
And I love seeing an employee be excited, because you know what? Sales guys, sure, they're going to make everything be, that's their job. They're always like, this is the best, greatest thing. And even if it's like losing money and bleeding out the back, it's the best, greatest thing. Okay. And you can only trust the sales guy so far. And then you can, you get to the engineers and the senior management. Also, it's their job to pump tires, though. Like, even if they're like some trepidation, it's always like, this is great. But when you see the workers on the floor, the actual like workers be excited about a process, then you're like, okay, this is legit. This is an actual thing. Because, you walk into the wrong shop on the wrong day and you talk to an employee, they're going to be like, this goddamn place, rah, rah, rah. And then you're like, whoa.
Not exactly a glowing review.
Yeah.
No, for sure.
Well, this is a great time to take our break. We're at 40 minutes already. So we'll take our commercial break. Sorry for our sponsors for making you 10 minutes late on the commercial, but, I'm sure you'll forgive us. And we'll be right back after this message from our sponsors. And we're back on the CWB Association podcast. My name is Max, and I'm here with Shayne from JNE in Saskatoon. So we were talking previously about, your travel from BC to Saskatchewan, your life into getting in at JNE, and then, kind of climbing your personal ladder, or like I say, you're climbing the rope, because it's not like there's someone necessarily holding it or helping you. It's climbing the rope a lot harder. But you're going through this process. But there was a couple specific questions that when I Googled JNE, and I don't know if you have the answers for these, but I'm just curious about your thoughts on them, and that I think they're very important things. And that's the partnership and agreements that JNE has with Indigenous owners, which I think is landmark and very important to all industry in Canada. You're looking at LNG projects up in northern BC that perhaps didn't consult Indigenous, groups as well as they should have. As to, there's a Pro Metal in Regina, there's JNE in Saskatoon, and it's starting to become more of a thing of having Indigenous ownership involved with manufacturing or large corporate companies, which I think is 100% the right direction to go in. So what is your take on that, or how does it work if you know the kind of the layout between JNE and their partners?
Yeah. So I believe it was 2016 we went through this process. So JNE is now, it was originally entirely owned by Jim Nowakowski, and then there was some management buy-in, and there was a few people that had stake in the company. But in 2016, there was 60% of the company sold to Des Nethe, Peter Ballantine First Nation as a joint venture there. I believe it's broken out. Des Nethe has 30%, Peter Ballantine Cree Nation has 30%. And for the Des Nethe side, and I should know this, forgive me if it's incorrect, one of those two groups is part of the English River First Nation, which is very northern part of Saskatchewan. So that acquisition or merger, or however you want to look at that, yes, it was a very strategic move for JNE. Obviously, for all the reasons you mentioned, there's a lot of weight these days put behind Indigenous ownership in terms of even just being eligible to bid on work. In a lot of cases, government contract work for any of the crown corporations almost requires some form of Indigenous ownership or at least involvement. So obviously there was a strategic element to that there. But more so than that, and I'm not trying to speak out of turn here on the company's behalf, but my belief is that we saw an opportunity as well to do a lot of good for the communities that make up these groups. As being 60% owners, every dollar that we make, basically 60 cents of that goes back to those communities and goes back to that group, right? And they divvy that up how they see fit. So I had an opportunity about 3 months ago. It was in May or June. I can't quite remember when. We went to a trade show in Pachinak, northern Saskatchewan, so a very rural community. Myself and our HR manager, Nicole Sauer, went up there. And I haven't been that far north in Saskatchewan ever. The furthest north I'd been since I moved here was Waskesiu for a camping trip.
No, which is beautiful, but more north has even more beautiful.
Oh, absolutely. But even just, to see how isolated these communities are, and how self-sufficient they have to be to live somewhere like that. Like Pachinak, I don't even think there's a grocery store. The closest thing away is a I can't remember the name of the town, but it's about a 45-minute to an hour drive away just to get to like a basic grocery store. So you can imagine the life that comes with living in a community like that. And to be able to see, like they've got a beautiful school there. That's where we did the career fair. They've got a beautiful school, beautiful children, lots of young families, lots of young children, and lots of tradesmen actually that work in the area. And to see some of the benefit that kind of comes as part of a relationship with that in the communities themselves was kind of a real kind of clicking moment for me, I guess, is one way to look at it. It was kind of like, wow, I knew everything on paper. I kind of had an idea of how this works, but then you actually see the impact that it makes. And I have taken that as a personal point of pride, to be honest, that our company is involved in something like that. And absolutely, it's something that took far too long to get to where it is, and it's still got a long way to go. Like, I don't want to say that we're done with reconciliation efforts and and integration of Indigenous groups into the workforce and stuff like that, but it's definitely gotten better than it was. It's still a long way to go, like I said, but it's much better than it was. And we acknowledge that when it comes to communities like that, it can be a pretty tough ask to have somebody come from a far north community like that and move to somewhere like Saskatoon to come work for a company like us. You're asking them to leave
it's like a different world.
Exactly. You're asking them to leave their family. You're asking them to move away from their homeland, completely change their way of life. So we've made a real conscious effort, as far as our group goes and how we, bring people about to try to make sure that, it's always a positive experience for everybody that joins our team. And we want to try to offer opportunities for young people or even, established tradespeople in these communities to say, if you're interested in moving, like, we're not a tech company, you can't work remotely for us because as of now, you can't weld remotely. Give it 15, 20 years, maybe.
Yeah.
But as it sits right now, they have to come to us in order to do the work. So, we want to make sure that they know, there's lots of opportunity here. We'll support you 100% of the way. And if you have any questions, if anybody has any questions about that or anything like that, again, same as I said before, you can reach out to the website, get in touch with one of our people, and we'll provide more information on that. But it's an extremely important part of who we are, and it's really shaped the company as it's changed over the last few years for sure.
Well, that's what you're talking about in this involvement in more remote communities is a battle that I'm also fighting with CWB or on behalf of CWB in terms of trying to get our funding, our programs, our system that we do. We're a not-for-profit at the end of the day. And I know all the welders out there are like, you just take our money. And yes, we do. 100%. We do. We take your money as all, if you're CWB certified or a welder or whatever, there's all these things. But your money isn't just going into people's pockets. That money, we're under a not-for-profit banner under the government. So everything that's made after, the bills are paid goes right back into the welding community. And what happens is that, and this is not like a culpability, this is not like someone's fault, it's just the way it works, is that people will tend to give to what they know, right? Yeah. So like head offices in Ontario, people that work for CWB, the vast majority of the workforce is Ontario based or born and raised in Ontario. So a lot of the funding and connections goes into, companies that are well known or areas that are known and people that know people and blah, blah, blah. And I work in Saskatchewan. I live in Saskatchewan, but I work for this company and I know Saskatchewan, and I've been up north. I've worked in communities like this, and I'm trying very hard to at least pull as much as I can into these northern areas and try to create programming and that's more, Western supportive, because I think CWB wants to do that. I mean, I know they've told me like, yes, we want to do all this stuff, but it's how is the question, right? It's how is the obstacle. So, there's a part of me that's like, you guys went up, and actually I know other people that were up at that career fair because I saw their pictures and it was a pretty big deal and it looked like it was fantastic.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, why am I not there?
Yeah.
Why? So I'm like, how do I get invited to that next year? How does the CWB get to be a part of all these little initiatives that are happening all over Western Canada, right from Manitoba to the Pacific Ocean? There's all these little programs happening with these great Indigenous groups that are strong, large, and well organized Indigenous areas that we're missing out on opportunities. Like I'm jelly. Like I want to be in there. I want to get in there. Right. So, this is my note to you. next year, invite me. Any of these things come across your plate, because I don't have access. You are tied, a JNE is tied through the mining association, through your Indigenous ownership, to perhaps things that I don't know about. So, Shayne, bro, send me these invites. Let me know, hey,
Absolutely.
there's a thing happening up north. We will be there. Like, I mean, we have 2 chapters in Saskatchewan, one in Saskatoon, one in Regina, and plus we have the backing of the national office. So this is something
Absolutely.
that's on our radar.
Excellent. Yeah, no, that would definitely be something we would pass along. That one specifically was a request from our ownership group to be present. So it wasn't something that we coordinated internally, but there's tons of opportunities. I think about a month or 2 prior to that, there was and I'm going to butcher the acronym and the name of the show because I can't remember it, but I believe it was the Indigenous Manufacturing Supply Chain Forum. And it was essentially a meeting of Indigenous owned or Indigenous partnered manufacturing companies. And it happened at TCU Place in Saskatoon. Another perfect example of a place.
Oh my
where
God, I should have been there 100%. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
because every one of those manufacturing companies would have to have some type of CWB
absolutely
standard.
Yeah, I think like 70% of the displayers that were there were welding stops. So yeah, that's something CWB should have its fingers into. But yeah, that's absolutely something that we have no problem helping you with getting those connections, and it's because we all got to work together in that. That's
and like I
something
said, you can only know what you know until someone tells you. And I wish I had the magic ball to just be like, and even Google, I'll let you down, being like, Indigenous groups. Oh, well, like that. It doesn't work like that. Like it needs to be a lot of this grassroots collaborations, which is exactly why we do the podcast. I learn as much as you learn, and our listeners too, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of like the Saskatchewan thing, from what I understand, is helping your neighbors. That's basically what this whole province kind of came up around, right? Like scratch my back, I scratch yours type thing, right? That's how this all works.
Yeah, well, we're all in the middle of nowhere, so
yeah, exactly. Nobody else is gonna come scratch our back, so
it's 3 hours to the nearest back scratcher, so you better get it while you can.
For sure, yeah.
So now, what's the future look like for you, Shayne? Like what your position now as a project manager? You've moved into now more of a management type role. I imagine as a project manager, you still get to go on the floor here and there and check things out. What's kind of like your dream? Like where do you want to end up, or where do you see yourself?
Oh, that's a loaded question.
And if you're one of his bosses, turn off the dial right now for about a minute.
Yeah. No, you know what? I mean, I'm excited to see how, honestly, the next 4 to 6 years evolves here. I've really, like I said before earlier, I've really appreciated the opportunities that Janie's given me. I love the job I do. The project management or the project manager role, I should say, is kind of it's a loosely defined term, I guess, is in one way to look at it. It's kind of one of those things where that position or that role hasn't really been an official role for forever. It's like the last 10, 15 years, it's kind of been identified as more of an official position than it was previous. So
it's like a step in between upper management and lower, right?
So the scope of the role can change depending on the organization you work with. Even within JNE, like my role, I'm not quite the same as our other project managers. So we have our standard project management group, which are the guys that run most of our projects. But with me being basically the head of our quick fab division, project management basically encompasses estimating, business development, CAD work, a little bit of engineering, like off the cuff engineer work. So it's a very multifaceted role, in that any given day, I'm not just doing project management. I could be going out to a site to go look and quote a project, or I could be working on an estimate for, some of the work that our estimating group doesn't have time to look at, or I could be developing drawings for a rush project to go through the shop, that kind of stuff. So it really, it's been diverse enough and evolved. The role has evolved while I've been in it enough to keep my attention focused and to keep me happy. So as far as my long-term plans go, I don't see myself leaving JNE. I'd like to definitely stay with the company and grow with the company. The Jansen project is a perfect example. There's a lot of investment taking place there that we are fortunate enough to be partnering in a fair bit of that. I can't say too much. It's still, early days, but there's a fair bit of work that's going to be coming out of that.
It's huge.
Oh yeah. I mean, everybody in this province is going to get a piece of that at some point, I think. Yeah. So we've got really good opportunity again to, grow even further than where we are now. So who knows, 6 years from now could be that maybe I'm not in the quick fab department anymore. Maybe I'm running large projects, or maybe I'm, helping in some other business development roles. There's lots of different avenues that this can go on, and that's kind of something that I've seen a lot of in JNE. There's been lots of opportunity to grow and expand your role, and we're not like a lot of other corporations where they kind of pigeonhole people into certain roles and they just say, no, that's what you are, that's what you're doing, that's where you're staying. We really acknowledge and look for growth in our people and foster that and help them. Like if you're showing on the shop floor as a welder that you've got a strong handle on leadership or a good organizational skill set, they'll definitely be considered for lead hand opportunities when they come up. Likewise for lead hand to supervisor to maybe into QA or whatever. There's lots of opportunity to kind of like move around as it goes. So I think what I would like to see out of my career, I've got aspirations to get my actual PMP accreditation is one thing that I would like to do. Just to actually have some kind of like a finished degree or whatever. Like I said, I didn't really do my red seal welding, so I've been kind of floating around for the better part of a decade without like a solid accreditation to my name. So PMP would be a good place to get one of those, I think, and just something to kind of have as a, way to go, bud. You got there. And as far as other goals and stuff goes, I just want to continue to grow, learn more, expand my skill sets, and take on larger and more interesting opportunities. I think that's basically my window that I'm looking through right now, I guess. Yeah.
Well, and plug that through the CWB Association, you can take discounted and free training programs, including program management courses.
Yeah.
Right?
No, that's definitely.
Did you know that?
I actually know what
you know.
Didn't know about the project management one. No, that's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. No. Check out the website on the training program. I mean, there's millions, and we've done the project manager ones. We don't fully sponsor. Like, I mean, that's one that's kind of higher up, but you can still get our discount. So, like, you get a discount on any of the courses that you find on the library. Period, just through the membership. So at least it'll knock a few bucks off. So
yeah, that's awesome. I'll definitely have to check that out.
And you talking about accreditation? Any thoughts about going back to get your red seal in either fab or welding? Like, fab is just a written test if you can get the hours signed off. Right.
Yeah.
It's just a written test. I got my fab ticket. I'm not saying it was easy. It was hard AF, but it's a good one to have. I
have thought about that. That might be something that is on the radar for a few years down the road, just to, again, like I was saying before, just to kind of check that box more so than anything. Right. I don't have any desire to go back to welding and fabrication, like on the floor anyways. Just the way it's evolved and the way I'm situated, I'm much happier. Not that I didn't like my job as a welder fitter, but I definitely feel like I get to do more in this role. So I definitely want to continue to move forward in that side of my career. But, it's always one of those things that it almost feels like an unfinished chapter of your life, right? If you kind of like got partway through something like that and didn't quite finish it. So it's definitely something that, it's been on my back burner, I guess, is one way to look at it for quite some time. But yeah, I think, now that I've said it on a podcast and it's out there for the world to hear, probably gonna have to try to follow through on it at some point, I guess.
Well, I think that over the last 100 episodes that we've been doing here, people have heard me and about my half-finished degree 1,000 times. So I'm actually should be signing up for September to for university. My boss here actually was like, dude, you got to get on that. And like, it's like, okay. Like, I gotta finish that off. Like,
yeah. Well, for the last couple of years, COVID was a thing. So
yeah,
had a bit of an excuse there, I guess, but
yeah. No, you can't get smarter during COVID. That's not allowed. Right. So.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So we're coming up on the end of the interview, but I definitely wanted to touch on something that we're going to be doing on the vice versa track here, the quid pro quo track, which is your podcast.
Absolutely.
So tell the listeners a little bit about your podcast and what you do and how it works and how to tune in.
Yeah, for sure. So nowhere near as developed as yours. I can tell you that right off the hop. I think you're signed in for episode 4, which is technically our 5th episode. We counted the episode 0 as our pilot. But essentially what it was an initiative that was started between myself, our former business development manager, Graham Corsair, and our business development administrator is her role, I believe now, Shayne Nowakowski, Jim's daughter. So the original company had his daughter. She's involved now. And basically what we did was, for the better part of its existence, JNE didn't advertise. Like, the only way people found out about us and that we got requests for work was word of mouth. It was like, who built that pressure vessel that's standing up at this refinery? Oh, that was JNE, 10 years ago or whatever. So we acknowledged, that was only going to take us so far. Word of mouth advertising it's great. I mean, it's definitely a strong way to build relationships and to get your name out there and to make sure that people see the quality of your work and then know what they're buying from you. But it only got our reach into the markets we were already in, and a little bit beyond that, right? So we put a fair bit of effort a few years ago into training our people. We didn't have business development people prior to 2018, essentially. So we started that process. We've done more social media integration, a lot more reaching out on LinkedIn, lots more presence on Facebook. I think we have a Twitter account, although I'm not on Twitter personally, so I'm not real super social media savvy, to be honest. I can run LinkedIn and Facebook, and that's probably the extent of my social media knowledge. But the podcast, we saw that as an opportunity to find another platform and another avenue to reach more people. We started it with the thought process around just, we're going to highlight who it is we are, what we do, show some examples of our projects. And since the departure of our business development manager, the program's fallen up more to me and Shallon, and we want to take it and take it even further. So that was where, reached out to you, wanted to get in touch with you and get you on there as a guest. We're trying to make sure that we turn it into a more regularly occurring program. So right now we missed July, but we're going to be hosting 2 episodes in August. So we'll have one on August 10th at 10:15. That's the one that you're going to be on. And then I believe the second one, don't quote me on this, is booked for August 24th or 26th. And that one's around noon or 12:30. And that'll have Eric Anderson from SIMSA on again to just do a bit of an update around what's going on in the province, the manufacturing sector as a whole across Canada at the moment, who have some feedback. But yeah, so you can find our podcast. It's linked directly on our website. If you go to jnewelding.com, the front page, there's About Us, there's Contact Us, then there's some products or services on there. There's a section in there speaking about project updates. So we got like a monthly update that goes on the website, and then it'll link to our podcast in both the YouTube channels, LinkedIn, Facebook, and then also the audio hosted version, which is, I believe, on most of the podcast platforms. So it's on iTunes, Google Podcasts. It's on Amazon, I believe. There's a few others that it's on as well. And please give us a like, give us a listen, and come listen to me talk for 30 to 45 minutes while I talk to a lot of other interesting people. I swear I'm not that boring to listen to for
No,
for
this has been a great interview.
minutes.
And how has the podcast done so far?
It's very early. You can say that. We're not very high in terms of recurrent listener count. I think our best episode right now has got about 55 plays. It's pretty low.
Awesome. No, that's good.
But yeah, it's growing. That's why we're doing things like this, right? We want to, like I said before, it's all about making new connections, getting more outreach. Nobody got to 1 million plus followers on Facebook or LinkedIn overnight, right? So baby steps, and we're working on it. There's lots of other stuff in the pipeline too, as far as our social media updates go. We're trying to get into doing some more kind of meet our people type stuff around, kind of showing the people that actually do the work. That's one thing that I've wanted to highlight for a while here on our social media platforms, is going out and talking, like you said, to the guys on the floor that do the work. Show like, hey, buddy, what's your favorite thing about coming to work every day? What do you like about being in this shop? And just kind of get some of those life stories out of our people, right? So put a human aspect next to those photographs.
I just did a presentation.
The giant fabrications.
I just did a presentation on that at FabTech, being like, hey, like you got to promote your success stories on the floor.
Exactly.
Don't promote the success stories of the money you made. Yeah. No one cares if you made $38 million last month, right? Like, I mean, that's not a thing. Yeah, you can clap yourselves on the back because your bonuses are riding on it. Hooray. But if you really want to promote your company, promote the people on the floor. And Absolutely. They say, you know what, I started here as a 17-year-old and now I've been here 30 years and now I'm the manager. That's a success story that makes people like your company.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's what makes us, it's the people from the ground up that build the organization, right?
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, that's the podcast. We've gone over an hour here, so we're doing good. And that was fantastic. You let everybody know how to listen to your podcast. That's on the JNE website. And, if people are interested in checking out what JNE does, they're in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan here. And what's the website?
It's jnewelding.com.
jnewelding.com. And, I hope we talk again. I'll be up in Saskatoon every so often, so I'll have to call you up and we can go for a beer and we can keep discussing.
Absolutely. I look forward to it.
Awesome, man. And for all the people that have been listening to the podcast, thank you. Keep sharing, liking, downloading. We're coming up on 20,000, downloads. So we're doing really well. And hopefully you guys can, keep pushing us forward. We're already getting hyped for FabTech in Atlanta. We're going to be down there. We're already booking podcasts down in the States. So we're going to be doing a big tour of some of the big names. I think we got CK Worldwide. I think we got a couple other big companies that we got on the list. I think, and I know I'm going to be meeting up with Jason Becker from Arc Junkies down there for another back-to-back podcast episode like we did last year at FabTech. So make sure everyone stays tuned for that, and make sure you sign up for your free association membership, and we'll talk to you next week. Take care.
We hope you enjoyed the show.